All right, good morning. Karen has been fussing at me for several years that I need to get hearing aids. And I've got the hearing aids. And I heard myself sing this morning. I want to apologize to all of you. But anyway, but what Karen failed to realize, it's not that I couldn't hear her. It's that I wasn't listening. And there's no cure for that. Turn in your Bibles to Hebrews chapter 2. So in the book of Hebrews, it's an interesting, it's a wonderful book. And the writer, the apostle, he begins in the book of Hebrews. He starts telling us how Jesus is better than. And he mentions several things. Jesus is better than Moses. He's better than Abraham. He's better than the angels. And that's interesting, right? Angels. We got this idea about angels being ministering spirits, and they are. But have you guys realized that every time you see an angel in the scriptures, something bad is about to happen? I mean, just terrifying, scary. They're coming and they destroy armies. They fight the devil. They do all kinds of things. In fact, the only time that we see a group of angels and nothing bad is going to happen is the day that Jesus was born. And that was the one time when these angels said, "Glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace, goodwill toward men." And so these messengers that's carrying out the will of God, and it's usually some bad things are going to happen. Bad things. Some of them are just terrifying. Can't wrap our head around it. If you read in Ezekiel, the beginning of the book of Ezekiel and other places, and you see these creatures, and these creatures that are beyond description, that are just terrifying when you consider them. And usually they're ministering. So who knows the first instance in the Bible where an angel speaks to someone? Can you think about that? Can anybody think about it? Once I tell you, you'll say, "Yeah, that's right." What? No. You know, I can hear you now. So the first time it's Hagar. You remember the story of Hagar? And Hagar, she's a mom, and she's trying to keep her son safe. That's what her purpose is. That's what she's doing. And she's being very courageous about it. And she is the first person that an angel speaks to, first human that we have recorded in there. And the thing was, the angel didn't tell her what she wanted to hear. And so Jesus is better than these angels. And the reason that Jesus is better than all of these things, Moses and Abraham and the angels and all of that, is as great as Moses was, as powerful as the angels are, they can't do anything about death. Over the last several weeks, we've been talking about freedom, how to be free. You realize that Jesus Christ paid the cost of your redemption. He paid the price to set you free. And we can be free. We can absolutely be free. But there's one thing that we deal with as long as we're here, and that is we deal with death. So I want you to read with me in Hebrews chapter 2 and start reading with me in verse 13. And so the apostle, he writes and he says, "Again, I will put my trust in him. And again, behold, I and the children which God hath given me. For as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took part of the same, that through death he might destroy him that has the power of death, that is, the devil, and to deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject unto bondage." And so Jesus, we understand that he paid the cost for our redemption. He paid the price so that we can be free. But what is it? We have to live this life with that constantly in the background. This morning before church, before you all showed up. I was walking around outside, and where was I walking at? I was walking at the cemetery. And every one of us were headed there. And so this death that is haunting us, it's stalking us. That's something, as the apostle here says, that keeps us in bondage. We're talking about being free. And a lot of things we talk about being free from. But this is something that keeps all of us, regardless of who you are, regardless of how high you fall or how high you rise or how low you fall. This is something that all of us are going to have to deal with. So how are we to experience this freedom from this fear? Because the apostle's telling us, he set us free. He destroyed him who has the power of death, and those who are all their lifetime in bondage to this fear, Jesus Christ can set us free. And so to understand what kind of freedom that we're going to experience, we need to think about it a little bit. So there's bondage, and there's bondage that comes from fear. Now, a lot of you know, several years ago, I had a very severe health crisis. And I was on the doorstep. I was going to die. Some of you can remember that. I was close. I was really close. And I couldn't realize something. I wasn't afraid to die. I wasn't. But what I was afraid of was the humiliation and the pain that was going to come right before it. You understand what I'm saying? I wasn't afraid of death. I was afraid of being humiliated. I was afraid of being helpless. I was afraid of not being able to do anything. And so I did pray. I prayed a lot. And what I never did is I never asked God to heal me. I never asked God to let me live. But what I did want to do is I wanted to serve him. And hopefully I'm able to do that. And so what is this fear of death that keeps us in bondage? Well, let's go back when death first came upon humans. You know the story, Adam and Eve, they're in the Garden of Eden. And you know that they sinned. They sinned, and God had told them, he said, if you eat of that tree, if you eat of the fruit of that tree, you're going to die. And of course, they're just like us, right? We're not going to die. I mean, especially when you're young, you don't even think about that. You're able to put it out of your mind. But they did eat of the tree. And a lot of people say, well, they didn't instantly die. Well, something did instantly happen to them. You remember the story. And the story is that when they ate of that tree, what does it say? Their eyes were opened, and they were naked. And what? They were ashamed. They were ashamed. And what were they ashamed of? They were ashamed of what they were. They were ashamed of what they had become. I mean, this is the first time that they had seen what they looked like without the rose-colored glasses. And immediately, death meant something to them then. Because what if I die in the condition that I'm in? That humiliation, the shame that comes from being in the presence of the judge of all flesh, like this. And I think that's the thing that keeps us in bondage. Shame, fear, humiliation, all of these things leading inexorably to a dark end. And that can be terrible. It can be fearful. It can be awful to keep those things in our mind. To die without distinction. This morning we were talking about Jonah in our Sunday school class. And I want to encourage all of you to come to Sunday school. We have a great time. But Jonah, and you're familiar with Jonah's story, God came to him and he said, I need you to go and I need you to prophesy in Nineveh. Nineveh is the capital city of the Assyrians, and the Assyrians were awful. The Assyrians were bad people. There are depictions that still exist today that what the Assyrians would do to their enemies is they would run a pike up their entire bodies, their entire digestive tract. So you understand where the pipe was inserted and it came out of their mouth. And then they just let them suffer. They just let them die there. And Jonah did not want to experience that. And so what did he do? He started running in the opposite direction. He gets on the ship, the story of Jonah, and he's on the ship, and of course a storm arises, and the sailors are terrified. This is the worst they've ever seen. Everybody's praying to their God, and Jonah finally comes out with it. They said, tell us, why is God doing this? And Jonah tells. And what's interesting is, with these men's lives on the line, as fearful as Jonah was of death, for that one moment, he finds the courage to tell these men, you need to throw me overboard. You need to cast me overboard so this storm will stop. And so what happened? Here he was running because he was afraid to die. It had been an awful death too at the hands of the Assyrians. But now, when his life had a purpose, when it had meaning, then Jonah found the courage to face death. So it's the courage to have a death that means something, a death of distinction. We're humans, and as men, we're starving for recognition. We are. That's why you understand what it meant, Adam and Eve, to be ashamed. We want people to like us. We want people to think that we're good. We want people to know and believe that we're valuable. We want those things. And one of the things that keeps us in bondage is knowing where this all leads. And if I end up there in that place, what I am today, that's terrifying. And a lot of people, they're living in bondage to this. You see, humans care about these things. We care about life and death. We're greater than the animals. Animals, I've got a dog over there and I love her and she's a great dog, but my dog does not contemplate her mortality. She doesn't think about that. She's thinking about when I'm going to drop something she can eat. That's all she cares about. But we do. We think about these things, and it can be terrifying. It can be scary. We're physically limited like the animals, but we have this unlimited horizon. We have a view of eternity. We see that, and we know that death is wrong. We know that it's not supposed to be this way. We know that there's something that comes after. And we can try to push that out of our minds. We can try to not think about that, but it's impossible. There's going to be a time when we die, and not just a death, but this death with the implications that we're going to be naked and ashamed, that we're going to enter into eternity no better than we are now. So what humans do, and I want you to think about this today. I'm not going to keep you very long today, but I want you to think about this as you're going about your business. And I want you to notice that almost everything the people around you are doing is they're trying to keep the thought of death away. They're trying to silence that fear in their heart. So what are some of the things that people do? What are some of the things that people do in order to avoid thinking about it or to get ready for it? The most obvious one is religion, correct? Religion. Now, I'm not talking about faith. Faith is something altogether different, and faith is what I encourage all of you to have. But folks, since the beginning of humanity, we've been religious. And we do this because we know how it's going to end. It's pretty much 100%. That's how it's going to end. And so we become very religious. So we'll read every once in a while about one of these religious fanatics that straps a bomb around their waist and they go and they kill a bunch of innocent people, or they'll walk into a synagogue with a rifle, knowing how it's going to end. Even we have this the school shooting phenomenon that seems to occur more and more often. These kids, when they walk into that school with their gun, they know how it's going to end. They know what's going to happen. But here's the thing. Remember what I said. The death and the implications of death. If I can blow up a school bus in Jerusalem and take out a bunch of Jews, my death is going to matter. It's going to mean something. That's what religion tells us. Whether it's Islam, whether it's Judaism, and some Christians are like that. It's death. How am I going to die? What's my death going to mean? Is it going to be important? And so we live that fear. We have that fear. And I know good people, and there's some very good people, and they're very religious, but they're also very afraid. They're very afraid, and so that keys into their religion. So why do you do the things that you do? God's going to get me if I don't, right? There's a fear. They have this fear. What is this fear? Well, here the apostle, he describes it. It's death, and it's the implications of death. And so some people will turn to religion. They're going to turn to religion if I can get the rituals right, if I can say the magic words in my prayer, if I dress right, if I do whatever, then maybe that darkness will be at bay for a while. But then there's some other things that people do is some people will turn to drink or drugs, right? They just want to escape the life that they're living in. And if I can do that through alcohol, if I can do that through drugs, then that's what they choose. Yeah, that's the distraction. Now, what it does, I think you all know, is once it gets a hold of you, it makes the life you're living worse than death itself. It gets a hold of you, but you understand the appeal of it. So the first church I pastored a church up in Anderson County. It's a very small church, but I had this guy that would come, and he was faithful. He'd be faithful for 2 or 3 weeks, and then he'd go missing for 3 or 4 months. And then he'd show back up, and he'd be faithful for a few weeks, then he'd go missing for months. And so I'm asking one of the guys, so what's his story? I asked one of the guys, what's this guy's story? And he said, look, so when he's coming to church, he's sober. But when he falls off the wagon, he's gone. He's right. Now I'm fresh out of Bible college, so I know all the answers. I'm going to fix it. And so I go and I sit down and I start talking to this guy, and he served in Vietnam. And his job in Vietnam, he was a tunnel rat. Do you know what that job was? What a tunnel rat does? Okay, so the Vietnamese, they would dig these holes. They would dig these caves, these tunnels under the ground. And so, they'd hide in those holes, and then they'd come back up in the middle of the night and kill a bunch of American soldiers. And so when the soldiers would come across one of these holes, they would send a guy down there. And he'd go down there with a flashlight and a 45. Can you imagine doing that? Can you imagine how to? And so he was wrestling with that fear, but he was wrestling with what he did. Okay? And after he gets through telling the story, I can understand why somebody wants to distract themselves with drugs or alcohol. But it's not just alcohol or drugs, is it? What are the other things that we distract ourselves with? All right, how many of you have this? How many hours a day are you staring at a screen? And why are you doing that? Because as long as these little pixels are moving across this screen, I don't have to think about my life and where it's headed. We can do that with, with cell phone. We do that with television, YouTube. How many get home from work at 4 o'clock or whatever time you get off work, and then you just have to numb yourself until you're tired enough to go to bed. And so this is what people do, is they distract themselves from this. And what are they distracting themselves from? What's waiting at the end? It's coming. It's coming. And if I can do something to where I don't have to think about it, then I'm not thinking about it. And so it can be religion, it can be drugs, alcohol, it can just be just trying to anesthetize yourself with anything, entertainment or what happens. And then some people, what they'll do is they'll just get lost in the mundane. They'll just get into a schedule and allow that to numb them from what's going on. Correct? You've seen a lot of people, and then they'll have these mental illnesses where they have to move things. Hey, girls, can you guys go sit back over Jackson and Bethany? Keep them straight for me. Can you do it? Yeah. Thank you. Bethany gets a little loud. I need her to, you need you to keep it calm. So anyway, you've seen people and they'll have like it's a mental illness, and they have to do the same thing over and over, like they have to flip a light switch 100 times before they turn it off. And OCD, that's what it's called. And a lot of times we're thinking, well, they're just weird, right? They have to keep their socks neat. No, it's worse than that. That's a disease. It's a crippling disease. And they got it in their mind, if I do not turn this light off the right way, then my family's going to be destroyed. Why? Because there's this fear that has just got them in bondage. And so a lot of people, they'll push that away through the mundane. Just little things. Just stay busy. Just constantly stay busy. Keep moving. Anything where I don't have to think about what's coming. This apostle, he's telling us about Jesus Christ, and he says Jesus Christ can deliver us from the bondage that is the fear of death. And how does he do that? Well, that's an interesting thing. But you understand and you realize that most people are engaged in what I would call an immortality project. And what I mean by that, their life has to mean something. They have to have a purpose. That's why a man will strap a bomb around his waist. So his death will have purpose, have meaning. It's the same thing with the kids who go into school, is they're going to know who I am now. Correct? And all kinds of other things. Why do men build skyscrapers? Because they're going to know that I did this. It's still going to be there 1,000 years from now. It's still going to be there. That's why the Pharaoh built pyramids, is that their life would go on. And we do this. We do it through our kids, don't we? We have kids, and a family. We can't have a family without kids, but we have these kids because there's going to be a part of me that continues. It's going to go on, right? Why do we run for office? People run for office because their life is going to have purpose. It's going to have meaning. Why do people amass wealth? Well, the reason I would do it is because you can buy all kinds of cool stuff with money. But for a lot of people, it's the status. Why do we seek fame? Because our life has to have meaning. We've got to have a purpose to it. And so what happens is, our world would not be what it is today without that. I mean, there would be no politicians. There'd be no road networks built. There would be nothing. But people want their life to have meaning, want it to have purpose. And so we have tied ourselves, we put ourselves into the bondage, this cage, in order to make our life have meaning. And this is with everyone, from a Nobel laureate to a single mother with 7 kids who just wants to be remembered those things. And I want you to think about, how do we identify ourselves? What kind of identity do we have? When you meet somebody new and you start a conversation with them, and what do you do? What's the question you ask them? So what do you do? Right? Because we identify ourselves by our occupation, don't we? I'm a teacher, I'm a truck driver, or I'm a nurse. We identify ourselves through a politician or through our occupation. If it's not the occupation, I'm a homeowner. I am a dyed-in-the-wool, orange bleeding fan of volunteer football. That's my identity. Why? Because instead of being just some schlub from Roane County, I'm a fan of the greatest team in the history of sports. And I will fight you over that. And so we identify ourselves as someone, something. Why? Because this is waiting. We know what's at the end of the road. And so we engage in these immortality projects. We do these things to keep from our mind that this is what's waiting. And here the apostle is telling us, look again at verse 15. He says, he can deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Subject to bondage. And so we can numb ourselves through drugs. We can numb ourselves through religion. And even if you're not religious, a lot of people who say they're not religious, they're very religious. Man is a religious animal. Your religion might not be fundamental, independent, missionary-minded, evangelistic, Baptist, but all of us are religious. And the culture that we're a part of is a religious culture. If you don't think about this, I want you to think about somebody that you've seen on television or on social media or whatever that does not share your political views. Whatever side you're on or whatever, think of somebody on the opposite end. Don't they seem like a religious fanatic to you? I mean, they're insane. How could they possibly believe that? It's just like they're brainwashed, correct? Whichever side you're on. So if you're, you guys kind of know how I lean politically. The liberals, they can't understand me. How can you possibly believe those things? Why? Because everything about man is religious. It's culture, even if you claim to be an atheist. It's all about religion. Why? Because we know what's going to happen. We know how this is going to end. And so we're doing all of these things to either distract us or somehow to keep our names alive. When I was walking in that tombstone, or when I was walking out there in the cemetery, every tombstone had a name on it. And so this person could have lived hundreds of years ago. We remember them now. If you don't have anything to do sometime, cemetery's kind of cool. Look at it. So there's this one lady out there, and she died, she died a long time ago. But her name is Partheny Mead. Partheny. Have you ever heard that name before? You never heard that? Partheny. And I've actually talked to people who remember her. Of course, people I talked to were old. But Partheny. And I thought, that is so unique. You know, we call our kids, Zach. We have boring names. But Partheny, it literally means the house of God. That's what her name means. And how unique that is. And none of you have met her. You might have, you just won't remember it. But she's remembered. She's remembered because I just told you about her. And you can walk out there, and maybe it's some of your family, maybe it's some of your parents, but in the back of our mind, we know that someday there's going to be a rock out there with our name on it. And so we do what we can to distract ourselves. We look at immortality project, something that our death will have a meaning. It won't be an indistinct death. And so what do we have? We have religion, and we have this culture, and we have this culture of gurus. How many, don't testify, but how many of you are listening to a podcast of a guy that's going to tell you how your life is going to be more meaningful? When you listen to that, or read a book, self-help book, go to any bookstore, and the self-help section is the biggest section there, other than the comic books. There's comic books everywhere. But we've got a culture of people who want to make their life meaningful, have a purpose to it. Why? Well, according to this apostle, the fear of death gives us a bondage because we know where this is going to end. We know what's going to happen. And so how does Jesus deliver us from that? Let's look again at this passage. In verse 13, the apostle says, again, I will put my trust in him. And again, behold, I and the children which God has given me. The apostle's going past himself here. He's not talking about himself. He is talking about what Christ has done. He has begotten us as children. We are his children. How do we learn to pray? Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. We are begotten in life. And so I'm going to put my trust in him. And as the apostle says here, him and the children that he has been given. And look at verse 14. Forasmuch then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself took part of the same. He became a man. You know, often we hear the question, did Jesus ever claim to be God? Well, he did. In fact, it's kind of silly to suggest that he didn't. And so we believe Jesus is God. But I need you to flip that coin. And I want you to realize that Jesus is the man that God became. And he became one of us. He was made in the likeness of man. He became human. He was born of a woman. And all of these things happened, and it happened in that manner for this reason. Look again what he says in verse 14. That through death, he might destroy him that has the power of death, that is the devil. I was joking in Sunday school class about I don't come over here at night. I don't. And do you know why? Yes, I am afraid of the dark. But, you know, I'll get these calls all the time. The lights are on. There's a light on at the church. Don't bother calling me. I'm not coming over here tonight. That light will still be on in the morning. Okay? Why? Because it's scary. It is scary. You hear things. You feel things. This overwhelming sense of dread that gets a hold of you. Fear of death. Fear of death. They say, well, the dead can't hurt you. No, but they can make you hurt yourself. And so this fear of death, Jesus Christ became one of us so he could die. We talked about Jesus saying, I'm going to give my life as a ransom for many. And we understand what he meant by that because we've been talking about that. I'm going to redeem them. I'm going to pay the cost to take possession of you. And the cost that has to be paid is death. He had to die. But by dying, he's able to free us from the one who has the power of death. And here the apostle calls him the devil. The devil. And this is from the beginning. When that serpent successfully tempted Adam and Eve, from that moment, that's the devil's trump card. Become as religious as you want to, you're going to die. Build a monument, build pyramids, you're going to die. Amass a fortune, unlike anybody else in your family. Have the biggest house, have the coolest car, have the prettiest wife, whatever. You're going to die. That's the trump card. And so the apostle's talking about living our entire life in this bondage. We've been talking about freedom, and I want you to be free. I want to be free. And how can I be free when at the end of this road, there's death waiting? So how does Jesus deliver this? This is not something I'm going to be able to finish today. We'll talk about this a little bit later on, but I want you to go back with me to that Sunday morning right after the crucifixion. And I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the disciples and these women. What had just happened is they saw the devil play his trump card. And the one that they loved was dead. Not just death, it's brutal death. It's an awful death. Excruciating is the word. And that word comes from the Latin word that means to crucify. Because the crucifixion is so painful, there was no other word to describe it. Excruciating, out of the cross. And they had just seen that. You remember Peter. Peter. Death was so fearful to him that he denied his Lord 3 times. Right? And the other disciples, they weren't any better than Peter. There was none of them that came to his side. There's none of them that walked with him up the hill to Calvary. There was none of them. He's dead. He's gone. Think about these women who had gone to the tomb to anoint his body. One of them was Mary Magdalene. Do you know anything about Mary Magdalene? What? Yeah, that's what the Bible tells us. It said, out of Mary Magdalene, Jesus cast 7 devils. Now, the Bible is silent on what those devils were. But we can guess, can't we? If somebody has an addiction, you think they're possessed by a devil? Right? What about somebody, like I talked about earlier, that they're so terrified that, they're having to do everything 100 times? You think they're possessed? Well, what about a person who is so afraid that they can't live their life? You think? Jesus had cast 7 devils out of her. And we don't know what the devils made her do, but there were 7 of them. So her life probably wasn't worth living. And now, the only one who had given her hope was dead. It was gone. And so as Mary approached that tomb, and you know the story, right? When they approached the tomb, they noticed that the stone had been rolled away. And as they got closer, these women saw 2 angels. One is at the top and one is at the bottom where Jesus had laid. And you remember what the angel said, why are you seeking the living among the dead? It's an interesting question. Why are you seeking the living among the dead? He's not here. He's risen. And then, of course, they took off. They took off running. Mary didn't hear the angel say that because as soon as she saw the empty tomb, she ran and told Peter and John. And, of course, they come. And so Mary, she shows up. She doesn't see the angels. She doesn't hear this news that he is risen. But what she does do is she encounters Jesus Christ. And she doesn't know it's Jesus. She doesn't realize that it's him. And you say, why? Grief. He probably looked different than he did the last time she saw him. And the last thing that she expected was to see him walking around. And you remember the story is she thought he was like the gardener or something. And this struck me what she said to him. She said, if you have taken him away, tell me where he is, and I'll go get him. Now, paraphrase, of course. But I want this to trickle down into your ears. The only hope that she had was to be able to hold on to a dead body a little bit longer. Right? Just tell me where he is, and I'll take him. And, I see this a lot in people. They've lost somebody that they love, and all they have is, I can hold on to that memory in there, right? But then what did Jesus do? He said, Mary. He called her name. And immediately she knew who he was. You say, why? Why? She had seen him. She didn't recognize who he was, but she heard his voice. She heard his voice. I want you to go back to the very beginning of your Bible. And what you're going to see, you're going to read that when God created this, what he did was he spoke and things were. He said, let there be light. And there was light. When I get to the first chapter of the Gospel of John, the first thing that apostle tells us, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. Of course, he's talking about Jesus Christ. And he calls Jesus the Word. The Word. And that word that is spoken, it brings order out of the chaos. Go back to chapter 1. The earth was without form and void. It was chaotic. There's no shape to it. There's no substance to it. But what happened? God spoke and order was came. John says that's who Jesus is. He's this Word. He's this Word. And so here is Mary, and she is in darkness. The only hope she has is just to hold on to a dead body a little bit longer. And what is the only thing that brings her out of that darkness? The Word. He calls her name. You remember Jesus earlier, he had told him, he said, I'm the good shepherd. My sheep hear my voice. And they won't follow another. They'll hear me. So how does Jesus deliver me from bondage? Well, the first thing is he begins to speak to us. And where do I hear the words of Christ? You've got it in your hands right here, don't you? Are you holding a Bible? Maybe you got it on your phone. That's where it is. It's the words. He begins to speak to us. And so immediately, Mary's whole life was changed. She thought she was at the end. It's never going to get any better. The one that I love more than anything is gone. But immediately it changes because she could hear the words of Christ. All right. So there's women that come to the tomb, and James and John, or Peter and James come running to the tomb. And but there's another two disciples. And they were getting out of town. Why were they getting out of town? Because they were killing people. They were going to catch them and do awful things to them, so they ran away. And they're walking to another town, which is a couple of days' journey away, a town called Emmaus, and they're sad. They're surrounded by darkness, just like Mary was. Why? Because death, the trump card had been played. And they're walking away. And so again, Jesus shows up. He starts walking with them. And they don't recognize him either. I just want you to think about, just for a second, how playful the resurrected Lord is. He had already defeated all the enemies. And now what's he doing? He's playing hide and seek. So anyway, Jesus starts walking with them. And he asks them, he says, why are you sad? And they tell him. And they even say this, we thought he was the one. We thought he was the answer to our prayers. Now he's dead. So as Jesus, when he's walking with them, he begins to tell them about the scriptures. And he started in Genesis, just like I asked you to start. And Jesus, when he starts walking them through the scriptures, and he's telling them these stories, and he's showing how that from the very beginning, it was necessary for the Messiah to embrace death, that he had to suffer. that the redemption had to be paid. And he's telling them this story, and they finally get to where they're going. They sit down to eat, and Jesus breaks the bread, and they recognize him. You say, why is that breaking the bread? How could they recognize him when he broke the bread? Well, think about it. The last time they had seen Jesus, they're sitting at a table, and Jesus breaks the bread, and he says, take, eat. This is my body, which is broken for you. Drink from this cup. This is my blood that was shed from you. So when he breaks the bread, they recognize who he is, and he takes off. He leaves. And this is what they said. This is what they said. Did not our hearts burn within us when he spoke to us? His words. His word. The words of Jesus Christ has the power to start opening whatever cage you're in, whatever has you bound. Whether it's religion, and a lot of people are bound by their religion. Whether it's religion, whether it's an addiction, whether it's just mind-numbing entertainment, or the mundane. The words of Christ can start to open that door for you, to deliver you, who through the fear of death have been held captive all your life. We're going to talk more about this, but time is running out this morning. You can go ahead and ask the ladies to come. And as they come, here's going to be the invitation. The invitation is going to be, it's just going to be simply this. How many of you, any of you, are willing to admit that you're in a cage right now? You're in a cage, maybe of addiction, maybe of religion, maybe this cage of always having to be the best, doing your little immortality project, whatever it is, and you are held captive in bondage to that. I'm going to tell you right now, Jesus Christ can set you free. But you're the only one who can walk out of the cage. He's paid the cost. His word can deliver you. But you've got to walk out of that cage that you're in. Let's stand together. I do thank you, Lord, that thou hast delivered us from the fear of death. And I'm going to ask God, if there's anyone here, any soul right here today is terrified, that's afraid, that is held captive, I ask you to give them the courage to walk forward and to walk out of the cage that their life has become, knowing that whosoever comes to you, you will never reject them. And I ask God that you would do that this morning. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.